Hey, welcome back. And if you're new here, my name's Christina Kent, and I'm a fine artist based out of San Francisco. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through my process for doing a larger figurative painting that I call Boundaries. This painting, it's not exactly a self-portrait. The model in the painting isn't me, but I identify a lot with her, and we have a lot of physical similarities, so I almost see it as a self-portrait. It's pretty moody, it's pretty contemplative, and I think you're gonna love it, so let's check it out. I did this painting while I was at an artist residency in Newfoundland, so my studio setup is a little different from usual, and I also didn't bring my full range of colors. So for toning the canvas, I would usually use like a raw sienna. I didn't have that during the residency, so instead I just mixed a brown using some cadmium red, some cadmium yellow, and some ultramarine blue. I then thinned this mixture down with some Gamsol so I could tone the canvas a nice warm color. I used a slightly darker version of the mixture for the underpainting of the girl, who I've placed in the center of the canvas. The girl in this image is wading into a lake, and I liked the idea of having her figure be in the center of the composition, giving the composition a sense of balance and sort of a sense of peace. The girl's looking down and she's probably contemplating something, and I liked the idea that she was kind of central to the canvas while we're focused on what's going on inside her brain, what's she thinking about. After doing the underpainting, I start to mix my colors, and I don't always pre-mix colors for my paintings, but especially if I'm working on a larger painting, I like to have some color mixtures to start out with, and then I can adjust them and add to them as necessary. I find with large paintings, sometimes I end up running out of paint if I don't pre-mix some colors, so I like to start with a few different color mixtures. And so here I start by mixing my darkest colors, mixing the deep, dark blacks that are in her clothing, and then I go on to mix the slightly lighter tones. So I have some bright reds for her skin and some deep greens and purples for the water in the foreground. The lighting situation in my photo reference is very strong, so we have a lot of really dark colors for the part of her that is blocking the light, and then we have a lot of light colors for the part that's getting hit directly by this bright sunlight. And then on the edges of the very dark and very light colors, we have some really saturated sections that you'll see later in the painting. So I try to mix a whole range of these colors, the darks, the really light lights, and then a few notes of highly saturated color. Even though she's standing in the water, I'm not going to mix much blue for this painting. She's in a lake, which tends to be greener in color, and she's standing really close to the shoreline, so the parts where you can see the color of the water, it takes on much more of a greenish tinge. And that's also going to complement really nicely with the red and pink in her skin tone. Once I've finished mixing my colors, then I start the painting process. And as usual, I start by painting the darkest sections first. The girl is wearing all black, and she's sort of being backlit by the bright light reflecting from the water, so most of her figure is very dark. I paint in these dark, almost black areas, and as I'm painting in the black mixture, I slightly modulate the amount of red, yellow, and blue that's in the mixture to just give it a little bit of nuance in different sections so that it doesn't just read as one flat color. For the areas that aren't completely in shadow but are still pretty dark, I used the brush to lightly brush on a little bit of the black mixture, and this will mix nicely with the next colors that I lay on top. Once I finish painting the darkest parts of the painting, then I move on to painting the midtones. These are the areas of the form where we're moving. They're transition areas from dark to light, and they often tend to have very strong, saturated color in a situation with strong lighting like this. In particular, I noticed the midtones around her arms and her face have this just very bright, very saturated red. And here I'm also using these saturated areas to draw your attention to her head that's looking down, and also to draw your attention to her arms, to her pose. Her pose is so indicative of her mood and what she might be thinking about, and so it's something that I really want to emphasize in the painting. I also add subtle notes of a very neutral green to where her shadow hits the water. After painting these midtones, then I move on to painting the parts of the composition that are getting hit by this direct sunlight. For the part of the water that's getting hit by the sunlight, I use a very light mixture of greenish blue, so light that it's almost white, because I really want to give that sensation of the bright light reflecting off the water. It also creates a beautiful contrast with the girl's silhouette, and the greener hues in the water contrast with the red tones in the girl's skin. I slightly vary the brightness and the saturation of the colors in the water to create a sense of movement, to give you that feeling that there's some ripples, there's some small waves that are happening in the water around the girl. And I feel like this helps move the eye around the canvas. It also creates some nice horizontal lines that give the composition a calming feeling. At this point, I've blocked in all the colors, and I'm really happy with how they're working together, but the painting has too much of a stiffness to it. It's too crisp, it's too defined, and I want to give it more of a thoughtful, contemplative mood. I want to give it more emotional power, so I decided to use the palette knife to create some atmosphere. I love using the palette knife for this because it can allow us to soften edges and break up harsh lines, and it gives the painting a softness, and it can also create some ambiguity in the painting where we're not exactly sure where one form ends and another begins. I find the palette knife especially helpful when painting water and when painting bright lights that are bright reflections. The palette knife can allow us to kind of scrape the paint to create that feeling of light bouncing off a surface. I also use the palette knife to break up the boundaries between the girl and the water behind her. I feel like her figure it's a very strong shape. It's this strong, upright, dark figure, and it had an intensity that I felt I wanted to sort of soften that intensity a little bit. So I use the palette knife here to break up the edges between the girl and the water, almost as if she's dissolving into the background. So here's how the final painting turned out, and I'm really happy with the outcome. I love the strong shape of the figure, the girl in the center of the composition, but I also like how it's softened by the edges, by the brushwork, and also how there's this kind of shimmering water around her. It's both, I feel like it's somewhat contemplative, but there's also a sense of hope to it as well, and I find that really compelling. As I mentioned, I identify a lot with the girl in this image, and I feel like when I look at her, I have both a sense of doubt, but also a sense of hope, which is often how I feel in my artistic practice. So I hope that you can connect with this image as well, and maybe find a little piece of yourself in this painting. Anyway, that's all I have for today. I hope you liked this video. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. And as always, a huge shout out to my supporters on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for supporting this channel and making these videos happen. If you like my art, if you like my videos, and you want to help me make more, check out my Patreon at the link. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.